Taking help is seen as a sign of weakness or something's wrong with your brain or your mind. And then it's about if you can't solve for yourself, then you don't deserve to be elite. Because as much as focus is good, too much of focus is also not good.
Like I was about to ask, this was coming to right till here. That have you heard this? That first help India, then you come and help us in a way.
Remember the day I've been won gold. I literally shed tears. First, we want to understand, is it a fear of failure or are you chasing success? And for us to assume कि हम जो करेंगे वो perfect रहेगा, it's wrong because we're not looking for perfection here.
Because they are young, they are not being able to gather their those own life experiences, which will help them take on the kind of athletes that actually may be approaching them.
As sports psychologists, we don't solve problems. We help them understand their problems and issues better.
What a working day for us is like, what the kind of people that we work with, what is the kind of impact that we do, what brought us into this career. And that's what we aim to cover in this session with Dr. Sanjana, where she is one of the foremost sports psychologists. She's worked with umpteen number of national, uh, let me say, Olympic medalists, national associations, or national federations. And we would like to understand what brought her to this career, and if she could share some interesting stories and learnings, challenges that she has encountered along her way, and what advice she would have for younger people who are attempting to make a foray into this career. So that's the context for today's discussion. So, Dr. Sanjana, can you share a bit about your journey into becoming a sports psychologist and what brought you onto this career path?
So, what brought me? Actually, I moved to Singapore with my husband. I followed him here. And previous to this, I was a clinical psychologist by profession. And then there were a lot of unfulfilled dreams in the sports arena. I mean, my upbringing was such that there was a lot of love and care, but not so much support for sports for girls. So I did a lot of sports till high school. And but I knew that after high school, I wouldn't have that opportunity, and I'd accepted it. Not that I fought it. Perhaps I should have. I didn't. And then yeah. So when I came to Singapore, I had this opportunity to get onto a PhD. So that's when sports psychology happened. And then it was a very new topic for me. And of course, it wasn't easy to start with. But then I guess once you get into something, you want to give your best to it. And there was many resources here in the library and stuff. So leaned onto it. And, one thing led to the other. And yeah, before I know, I didn't do much of grassroots. I didn't have much opportunity to do that. So my first team was our university team, hockey team, way back then. And they were already intermediate level. It started with there, and very quickly, before I realized, I went into high performance. And yeah, it was very thrilling, how to say, very challenging. And I'm very competitive. So it kind of fed my soul in a way.
Okay.
To work at that level. And yeah, alongside, of course, I explored a lot of grassroots and intermediate because I didn't want to lose touch with that. I really wanted to understand how things are across the, sports ecosystem across all levels, and especially in our practice as a practitioner in our profession. We don't treat our clients differently, irrespective of whether they are grassroots or whether it's the greatest of all athletes. Okay. So yeah, so luckily that kind of helped me explore all strata of ability, skill level, competition, and there's always something to learn. So that is how the journey actually started, so to say. So it was a lot of education, a lot of education. Before that, I'd done my basic degree in Mysore, University of Mysore, and I'd done my master's in clinical psychology. So that was helpful too.
And can you share some highlights from this career that you've had thus far, Sanjana?
So when you say highlights, what do you mean?
Share the let me put it, the kind of people you've had an opportunity to work with, the experiences that
Mhm.
you've had that you would um, consider most cherished in the time that you've been a sports psychologist, and also could you also share since how many years you've been a practitioner as well?
Yeah, I went on this journey since 2002, clearly.
Okay.
Yeah, if I were to pinpoint at high performance.
Mm-hmm.
2001, it was mostly exploring, understanding sports psychology, psychology of athletes, really understanding that. In terms of cherished, I think again, in our line of work as professions, we don't pick and choose. You know what I mean? As to who
Yes,
exactly I work with, I can't take names of my clients,
I
but I
understand that.
can paint a journey in terms of, I was working in Singapore, I was doing my PhD on the side. I was teaching as well. That was a part of my arrangement of my education that I had to teach in the university. Then I was raising babies. My children were 1 and 3 years old around that time. And my husband is a tennis coach, so he was busy coaching. So a lot of things were happening then. And I had I wouldn't say chance meeting. I was on my way back from university after my class, back to home to my kids, and my neighbor had a visitor from USA.
Mm-hmm.
And that visitor happened to be the grand uncle of one of America's elite athletes during that time. So my neighbor introduced me to him that I'm doing PhD in sports psychology, and he got excited and he said, "Can you help my nephew?" And yeah, it kind of, you know, things kind of started from there. Grand nephew rather.
Okay.
And those were the Skype days, so you really had to dial in. And it used to take forever to dial in. So my online counseling started way back then, actually.
Okay.
And this was a very young man, very invested in sport, very passionate, and very ready to learn, eager to learn and grow. And so we both kind of navigated together. And that was also the only athlete I've worked with over 4 Olympic cycles. So yeah, we kind of worked for nearly 15 years together.
Okay.
Yeah, I've had athletes who have worked with 2 Olympic cycles and 3. They're say about 10 years, 11 years, but this one was for about 15 years. So if there's anything cherishing, or I would rather say very interesting about my profession, is when you work with your clients for a long period of time, and also noting that the only sports psychology field, it's not the only, but one of the few sports psychology fields I can say, where you kind of travel with your clients. Otherwise, typically psychology is they come into your counseling room and then you have those conversations and they're kept confidential and you don't know much about them and they don't know much about you and it's done. Whereas with the athletes, a lot of time is spent around them, observing them, their trainings, their competitions. You travel with them, you have discussions over meals. So you observe them very closely. You're very friendly, but not a friend. We have to be very careful about the boundaries. Also, because the physical boundaries are very blur, you see. So emotional boundaries have to be very clear because you can't have any other relationship other than that of a practitioner and client for things to work. And ethically also, it's not correct. So that is something I would say not very unique to our profession. So with that particular individual, I actually saw him grow, over 15 years. And then you get to know so much about them. And I think in many ways, a sports psychologist is one individual where athletes share everything about themselves. Most of what their parents won't know, their spouse, their partners, the coach won't know, their party with us, because we have a confidentiality and informed consent contracts with our athletes. So we strictly go by that. And yeah, so you actually see them grow over a period of time. And and it's not very easy to keep those boundaries, you see, because the more you understand them and the more they start, being comfortable sharing everything with you, somewhere they tend to latch on you emotionally as well. So there's this transference, counter transference kind of that thing which you want to kind of maintain. And yeah, so that was my first athlete. And then my clients have been purely word of mouth. So his coach passed my contact to someone and he passed it to someone. So from that someone to someone, for the 2004 edition, I had about 3 countries I was supporting. By 2008, it had mushroomed into 5, including Singapore, it was 6. And then from 2012 onwards, it's been around 10 or 11 countries. So, of course, as a single person, I can't take care of a lot of athletes because not by choice, but somehow the applications that come to me are those who are gunning for the podium. And these are very complex minds, amazing individuals. I mean, they're very different, right? But their minds are very complex. And I guess that's where I get the thrill and joy of working with them to kind of peel those layers and help them understand themselves. And because at the elite level, it's not so much you have motivation issues or, you can't focus, you see. It's mostly about how to dig deeper to bring the best out of you. Because more than often, once the athletes reach the top is when they realize that staying on the top is the biggest challenge. Reaching the top now seems like so much more easier. So to help them keep what they already have, right? Okay. And also dig deep because there's so much to us as human beings. There's just so much to us. And how do you kind of pull that out of yourself? So mostly at the elite level, that is the kind of work we do. And for that, we really need to help them reach their depth, to help them understand themselves. And also, once you're at a certain level, it's very difficult for an individual to let go of what has worked for them, to get them from here to here. But they must let go of most of it to go from here to here, you see. So actually helping them trust themselves and the team around them and, help them let go of that to actually kind of get to the next level. So that has been very interesting. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yes, Sanjana, thank you. Thank you. That was very insightful. Thanks for sharing that.
Pachu, I just want to ask one thing here. So, thanks a lot, Dr. Sanjana, first of all, for taking out the time. And it's always lovely speaking with you.
Same here.
So, I think, see, first of all, in terms of, let's say your own journey, and you have seen it all, I guess, in the last 24, 25 odd years. I think apart from, let's say, individual case studies or let's say working with clients, one thing I want to understand more about is how has been the acceptance of, let's say, psychology professionals, let's say local room of these sports professionals or in the very close-knit team or the close circle of a top-notch athlete. How has that changed? I hope that because as an outsider, as a fan, what we see and hear in the news that it is growing slightly. I don't know if it is enough, but let's say at some point in time, in India especially, like people don't even like to, mental health is a taboo, right? But from there to us having Paddy Upton as a, let's say, that mental conditioning coach in the 2011 World Cup, I think sports has traveled a lot. So if you can, let's touch upon that aspect of sports psychology as a career. Sure. That will be very interesting.
So you want to know, how's the stigma around it? What has changed? Now I see a marked difference between Asian and non-Asian countries. If you spoke about the geographical area, of course, in every Asian country, there's still a lot of stigma around, working with a psychologist because. Especially with elite athletes, if you're elite, you're supposed to be strong. You're not supposed to be weak. And taking help is seen as a sign of weakness or something's wrong with your brain or your mind. And then it's about if you can't solve for yourself, then you don't deserve to be elite. So even in countries like Japan, Korea, China, these are very well-performing countries of Asia. So there is that taboo even today. There's that stigma attached to it. You see, that's one. That does not mean it does not exist in other parts of the world. It does, but it's not as much, correct? So if you look at the Pacific area, New Zealand, Australia, so they have it in their system right from grassroots level. So they kind of normalize it. When you look at, the Americas, the North Americas, it really depends on what sport we are talking about. And generally across the board, throughout the world, for example, football, rugby, especially rugby for that matter, or martial arts. So you're supposed to be strong, correct? Anything you're supposed to be emotionally able to take everything that comes with the sport or comes with life challenges. And then there's a gender disparity. When a female athlete seeks help, it is still seen as okay. It's a woman. But if a male athlete does it, then it's seen as being a sissy, mind my language for that matter. So there's a lot of different thought processes, correct? Especially around COVID is where across the world I've seen a shift, when one, of course, COVID forced most people to kind of be slow down and reflect. And that's when most people understood that mentally they were not okay. And COVID didn't do well to our mental health either. It was such a challenge. It was such a curveball, right? We were not prepared for it. We were struggling to understand what things were like. And most people spend time at home, which they hardly do in this fast paced world today. So all of that kind of give opportunities to see, understand, feel, talk about it. And especially when Naomi Osaka spoke about, how she was feeling, correct? Or a Simone Biles pulled out of an event, Tokyo. So all this created a lot of positive impact on normalizing mental health concern. But has that solved the situation? No, correct. Now, coming back to India, I've observed India closely only for the last 4 years. Before that, I've been away. I've been in and out a little bit, but I never felt ready to be back and do what I need to do for India. So it's only the last 4 years. And certainly I've seen a shift. It's not just the athletes, even the coaches now are open to it. Is it enough? No. But then there is that progress. There is that, correct? And also, like for example, the nature of athletes I work with and the countries they come from, they don't want to talk about who they work with because they don't want to give away their preparation. That's also there, correct? So we all signed an NDA, non-disclosure. Already there's a confidentiality thing. Anyways, I would not talk about it. But the entire sports science, sports medicine team kind of signs an NDA that you can't give away certain aspects to the program. So they really don't want to give away the tricks of the trade because now technology is so advanced and everyone's almost using the same technology. So there has to be that little something that gives them that 1 or 2% extra. And what I've also seen with the athletes is, I'm not talking about India yet, is they're very, very committed to the program. Because for me, unless they promise that commitment to themselves, I don't take them on because this is not about me, this is about them. And working with a sports psychologist is work. It can't be once in a while you had a conversation or closer to the competition, you did a little bit. So this does not work like magic. Some motivational rara kind of a thing might work and die down, but everything else has to be worked on over a period of time. So that is also changing across the world. And then in terms of acceptance of a Indian sports psychologist, my background, I think that was the biggest challenge. That was the biggest challenge because, like I said, I found myself working athletes who were looking to podium and they did make it to podium. The remainder of the 10 odd support staff they would have, you hardly see an Indian, right? So for the athlete to accept me, because my clients come to me and then I kind of vet through whether I have the goods to give them and they are ready to commit to what it takes. And then we take it forward. So the athlete and the coach, they're in it 100%. But I have to work closely with the entire team. I must collaborate with them as much as this might seem like a one-to-one kind of a conversation with the coach, with the athlete, but there are a host of sports scientists and sport medicine staff I need to work with. And, we work on the data, we put it together, we use technology, and we kind of, do, when I do a needs analysis for each of my athletes, it's never just what I see, what I observe, what the athlete tells me, what the coach tells me. The data coming from these people is also becomes very important. So the acceptance of these teams, was one of the biggest challenges for me. Also because it's through word of mouth, my athlete and coach know, perhaps one or two who I've worked with in the chain of thing. But then I overtly don't talk about who I work with. So of course, after the second Olympics, it was the same bunch of people working with similar kind of sports. So, they get to know you. But acceptance of an Indian at a high performance level when India does not have medals in Olympics or representation.
My question was around that only.
Oh my word, I remember.
No, not that. Like I was about to ask, this was coming to right till here. That have you heard this? That first help India, then you come and help us in a way, right? Like
no, not so much that. For them, it was like, do you get high performance? But then luckily, that didn't put doubt in my head. For me, I was very clear about what I was doing. Now, do I know everything? Even today, I'm learning. There's so much to learn. So my answer would be no, I don't know everything. But then I remember the day I've been won gold. I literally shed tears for two reasons. One, that I was happy that finally an Indian has a gold, and second, for myself, relief. But by then, the acceptance was much larger. So those are the kind of challenges, and of course, the challenge of language. So I do my best to kind of restrict to when the applications come in to individuals who can speak English as well, because I don't want to learn other languages. I don't want to things to get lost in translation. So I stick to English, and initially I did try, especially for Beijing 2008. with translators and stuff, but then now they have to sign an NDA and they have to be present for every session, and confidentiality, it was getting a little too much. So now I figured another formula to manage it. But every single client I work with can speak English. So in terms of challenges around psychology and stigma and all of that was that. Now, cut to India, like I said, in the last 4 years, I have seen that shift. The challenge, I think, in India is they know sports psychology helps, but they don't know how. And they don't know how to avail it. They don't know, they're not much aware about what to expect, to know from whether it's the quality is good or bad, you see.
Okay.
Because the thing is, we work with the mind. If something goes wrong, it can go horribly wrong. And we can't tell. If there's a physical injury, you can tell where it is. If a physio does something wrong or a sports doctor does something wrong, you can fix it because it's visible. But mental injuries are difficult to first recognize, you see, and pinpoint. So in our profession, we have to be very careful. No help is better than wrong help or half knowledge help. But the thing is, in our ecosystem, the coaches and athletes are learning.
You are saying entitlement mindset that needs to change, that it's equal responsibility of yourself as well as the professionals with whom you are working.
So I think it's also because there's a misunderstanding that the sports psychologist will come and things will happen. वो कुछ करेंगे आपके साथ और चीजें हो जाएंगी, ऐसा नहीं होता है. काम करना पड़ता है, एक तो वक्त निकालना पड़ता है ना, वो conversations करना पड़ता है, and we teach them mental skills exercises. They need to integrate it during their training, and they need to religiously and with discipline and commitment learn them till it becomes habit. Because habit formation is very important, that such that during competitions, when you really need the help of these coping skills, automatically you have it in you. You might initially feel that a little bit of extra jitteriness or overwhelmness, but immediately your brain will activate what it needs to activate, which is a coping mechanism, you see. So that misunderstanding psychoeducation, and also because we have a lot of academic sports psychologists who are of my age group, right, 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And then you have very young sports psychologists who are doing practice. And because of the nature of the situation, now that there's an awakening in terms of, let's take a sports psychologist's help, they have clients who they're not yet prepared for in terms of understanding the sport, understanding the level. So the intention is good, but they're trying out things in their own little way. So that's there. And second, because there's no licensing or certification in India on, the ethics, the legalities of the profession. So most of the senior sports psychologists are doing things their own way, are not following procedures and ethics and all of that. So the boundaries are not being met. Again, I want to believe it's with a good intention. And then there's also this aspect where sports psychology has now become business, correct? To a point where they have like a taster session. Okay, you can sit in a session and decide for yourself. Psychology stuff does not work like that. If doctors started doing that, बड़ी सर्जरी करनी है, आओ थोड़ा छोटा कुछ करके देखते हैं. अगर आपको कन्विंस हुआ तो बड़ा कर देंगे. It's come to that. The system needs to kind of clean up. Is not the right word, but that's what needs to happen. And I want to believe that most of them engaging in these not so ethical practices are not aware of the ethical practices. So the education aspect of it has to change. And of course, there's some who are aware but don't want to follow. But then there's always going to be there in any ecosystem, right? It doesn't have to be in India, it can be across the world.
On that point, let's come to that if you're okay. So basically, what it takes to make a career in, let's say, sports psychology, right? Because right now you've touched upon a very interesting topics. One, there is an academic side to it. Second, there is a practice side to it. Because let's say there are very few professions where you put the practitioner word. So like it's used for lawyers, it's used for, let's say, your doctors, it's used for psychologists. So these are the professions where, and I think the practitioner is used because a lot of it comes to, Rutvik is pointing out to the CA as well. Yeah, correct. So because the nuances, everyone,
no, doctor, I'm an MBA, but I work with CA, so.
That's perfectly, because even the tax professionals, because, everyone has the academic knowledge, or everyone might have the academic knowledge, but the nuances of it, and you rightly mentioned that no help sometimes is better, or some help is sometimes better than, sorry, I'm putting it wrong way. No help is better than something. So basically, because sometimes slight wrong advice, if you are not, like you don't know the nuances, then it can land you up in a big problem. So coming back to there, so that is one. Second, you I think in other way you said that there is a need for a not many train the trainer programs and some
Yeah.
certification so that there is standardization. Like
Yeah.
even if let's say like how it happens in coaching. So like let's say if a school team when it comes to let's say team sports or individual trying to shift from some coach to other, they know what kind of coach they are currently at and where they are
Yeah.
shifting. So right now, I think if some kind of accreditation program is there, then
Yeah.
if when you want to shift, there is a process that, or there is a knowledge base that these are the 10 people who might be of interest. Coming back to the question, what it takes, let's say, to make a sports psychology career in first in, let's say, anywhere in the world, second, specifically India as a country.
So it almost always starts with a basic degree in psychology, general psychology, correct? So once you're done with that, then ideally, I think it helps to have a master's in psychology, a clinical psychology or applied psychology. And then you go on to do a PhD, which is where you kind of get certified and licensed. Even after master's, it happens. Now, across the world too, there's a master's in sport and exercise psychology, which you can take after your honors or basic degree in psychology. But does that prepare you enough and well? Perhaps not, because when you come out of a basic degree, you learn so much about psychology and the basic principles of mind and how it works and the theories and stuff. But then you don't have applied knowledge yet. So ideally, a basic degree or an honors, and then a post-graduation with clinical psychology or applied psychology, and a PhD should be the way. If there's no PhD happening, then at least a 3 to 4 years basic degree in psychology, and then at least a 2-year master's sports psychology program. Even at Loughborough, they've trimmed the 2-year program to 1 year. So it's become imparting knowledge and part business because everyone's going to get attracted to the 1-year degree. It's beyond my mind. How, first of all, how can you cover the different aspects of sports psychology in a year? And second, if you're not giving them any hands-on experience, you're certifying them as practitioners, and they need to get down to working as soon as they're out. So that's the scene across the world. And in some countries, if you want to work, you must, like UK, for example, you must get your licensing, Australia, New Zealand, USA. India, we don't have that. So India, we have about 3 or 4 postgraduate programs. And interestingly, each of these postgraduate programs have ethics, legalities as one of their full chapter or section of the curriculum. So if they have done what to say, if they have read what they're supposed to have read, then there shouldn't be a problem actually. That's what kind of like, is shocking for me. But assuming they haven't, then like Anand was mentioning, we need to somehow have these perhaps certifications or open conversations. So I want to make a mention of this organization called INSPA, INSPA. So this has been formed by a bunch of young sports psychologists who have recognized that about India, that especially the ethics part of it is not being adhered to. So without blaming anyone, they're intending to have open conversations about, let's mind the gap and fill the gap. Correct? So they're coming up with informed consent, they're coming up with instructions, guidelines on how to go about your ethics, etc., etc. They're yet to receive welcome from the Indian Sports Psychology Association, who's made up of individuals of my age and older, because you can't have young people, I think, seniors, what is right or wrong, right? That's the understanding. But I disagree with that. So these young bunch are doing the right thing. They're really putting their time and energy into making this happen. They have a amazing conference coming up in the month of March in Mumbai. Yeah. So there is that effort ongoing on the side.
Sanjana, I have a small follow-up question to what Anand asked. Would you advise people who have done their graduate and master's program to practice for some time before they look for their PhD, or dive directly into the PhD and then look to practice direct with sports persons? It's in two parts. One, second is what age group of sports persons would you ask them to start working with first? Or like you mentioned, beginners, intermediate, and high performance. So is there a starting point that you would advise?
So to answer your first question, I think it really depends on the course. If most PhDs are very research based. So the assumption that you learn how to do sports psychology through PhD is wrong.
Okay.
Unless it's a coursework kind of PhD where you actually have counseling modules, how to go about counseling, how to set up a counseling room, how to take down notes, how to maintain confidentiality, etc., etc. It'll be good if they can work for a few years and then get onto their PhD. Then they know exactly what they want to research on. correct? Largely in India, PhD has become a fad. So there are about 700 over PhDs, sports psychology PhDs in God knows where they are getting those PhDs from. So ideally, the quality of sports psychology should be amazing if we went by that metric. Unfortunately, it isn't. Now, therefore, I don't have a definitive answer, but assuming that you're doing a PhD with the intent of knowing more, understanding more, it helps to do some work. Now, the question about where should they start? They should start with supervision first. They need to find someone who's been there, done that, shadow this individual. They need to spend a lot of time on the field, maybe a good 3 to 6 months, just observing. Kahin bhi jao, it does not have to be a fancy place. It could be some small club, some school. बैठ जाओ, observe करो athletes को, coaches को, वहाँ क्या हो रहा है, behaviors क्या है. And जो आपने पढ़ा था, in your chapters, go back to it, read some more and try and understand. And then you'll find that what you read in the books is very, very far from what you see in reality. And to also understand the cultural, context and traditional context, because within India, there are many Indias, you see. So you can't see an athlete purely as athlete, because this individual is a product of their culture, their tradition, and so it's important to accept that and respect that and not change the culture. And also within the sport, also there's a lot of nuances. So the way a boxer thinks and a wrestler thinks and a judoka thinks is very different, although all three are kind of martial arts.
Combat, yes.
Yeah, correct. So if there can be so much of nuances within that, you can imagine how much there is. So the first thing would be to observe. Second would be to take supervision and start with a young bunch, grassroots perhaps, and also understand that you don't want to change the mind of these young people. You want them to be them, but you just want to kind of nurture them to kind of enhance the pace, correct? And then especially when you're working with young athletes or grassroots athletes, you need to understand the workings of psychology. You know why I'm saying this? Because around London 2012, between London 2012 and Rio 2016, the age of the elite athlete, at least the clients that came to me, dropped drastically, nearly by 10 years.
Okay.
Up to London, most of my athletes, or rather 95% of them, I can say safely, were mid-20s, late 20s. I'm talking about the Olympians gunning for podium finishes. With 2016, more than 50% of my clients were 18 and below, 17 and below. This was their first Olympics. They were the best in the world. They were world champions. Now, how do you kind of, what do you do with these young children? They're the CEOs of your sport, but 30 years ahead of time. So that is when I understood that all that works for elite and mature elite adult athletes can work for these young too. So you can actually breed a mentality of high performance in young people. But for that, you need to know how to do it right. So you need to have thought through, you need to be very self-reflective. And as psychologists, we need to be following what we don't preach, but what we are talking about, because you want to have these discussions with conviction. Of course, we don't place our values. That's not right. We accept an athlete or client the way they are. We don't judge them. But then you can't be complaining about something when you expect, when you're having a conversation with the athlete, where you're, encouraging them to push, stay motivated, internally motivated, etc., etc. So when you tell me if someone is freshly minted out of a course, what do? They also need to understand that they lack the maturity of life experiences. And that's why these observations of competitions and trainings become very important for them. Because when you get busy working, then you're too focused on those clients only. You miss out on a whole lot of learning. So they can patiently do that.
You had a question?
So, you emphasized a lot on ethics, but well, this could be naive, but I have no idea what is this ethics referring to. I mean, I don't have any psychologist friends.
Okay.
So, can you please?
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of things are non-ethical?
So basically, maintaining confidentiality. That's very important, because unless you give them that ethical consideration of maintaining confidentiality, your client won't open. And unless they open and unless they are honest with you, you can't help them to the best of your ability. You can't bring the best out of them. And as a practitioner, you are to uphold that confidentiality. You can break confidentiality without permission of the athlete only in some specific situation. For example, through your conversation, if you come to know that your athlete is a harm to somebody else's life, then you have to break confidentiality. The client's life is at harm from somebody else, or they're a harm to themselves if they're suicidal, for example, if they're doping, because here they're breaking law, correct? And of course, organizations might have their own laws, rules, and regulations to follow. So if you work for an organization, those could be included as well. So these are the only times you can break confidentiality and share about what the athlete has told you and the notes you have without the permission of athlete. Now we have to work with the coach as well, because this work works best when you work with the athlete and coach together. And it's important for the athlete coach to know what you're working on and why, because coach also knows so much more about the athlete, which the athlete might not know about themselves. Okay, so they also, assuming that your athlete is 18 and above in Indian system, you need to let the athlete know what you're sharing with the coach. And if the athlete says no, you don't share with the coach, full stop. Okay. Now, if someone is 17 and below, so you sign informed consent with your client. So that informed consent needs to be signed by the parent or guardian. And because this is a minor, 17 and below, then most of the things you do share with the parent or the guardian, and your client is aware of it. Now, does that mean that they're not going to open up completely? Perhaps. But because they're a minor, it is your duty to kind of follow the legal system. This is where the legal issues and things come in. And all this is done at the outset. Then again, in terms of ethics, your behavior, you won't cross boundaries. You won't have any other relationship other than that of a practitioner and client. You won't give gifts. You won't accept gifts. You clearly mention what your fees are, how it's supposed to be paid. You clearly mention that at any point your client can leave the session without giving you any explanation, and you have to accept it. Then you clearly mention that if you know that you can't help your athlete in a certain area, you'll refer them to someone, or you will let them know that you can't help them. Correct? That you'll kind of update on your knowledge, that you're going to give them the best there is with the right intention. So there's a whole list of them. And now that social media is rampant. So we don't share about the client we work with. That's also breaking confidentiality. A client is allowed to talk about who they work with if they choose to. So we can't push them, or there can't be that expectation that the client talks about you to the world. We don't post on social media who we are working with. Now, if there's an organization you're working with and the organization needs you to talk about the fact that you're working with the organization, that's okay. But if the specific client with a name, you don't. Okay. Your client might tag you. That's their prerogative. I think I would encourage, I've not encouraged my clients, but generally speaking, I would encourage athletes and coaches to talk about who they're working with, because that normalizes the profession and more people seek it. But it's okay for them to do it, but you don't do it from yourself. So that's also ethics. And, respecting the culture around the ecosystem. Now, just because I come from Singapore and I work with other countries does not mean that I do not adhere and respect to the cultural expectation of the ecosystems in India. It would be very different in the cities. It would be very different in a private sector. It would be very different in a, state-run facility. So as a practitioner, I need to kind of respect those things. And certainly as a practitioner, I should not be placing my values on my clients, be it religious, opinion views, political, right, wrong, anything of that matter. So there's a whole list of that.
So, Sanjana, given that this is an Olympic year, we'd all like to understand what a day in your life looks like. So could you take us through what kind of activities and responsibilities that you have?
I'm a little concerned sharing about this. I'll put a disclaimer because
sure.
The way how I engage myself is very long, because generally I sleep for a max of 3, on some days 4 hours a day. I don't have like a weekend or a holiday, so to say. That's how I've set up myself, working with these different athletes who are competing at different zones. And most of the time I'm on the road traveling with them. The only smart thing I've done since, before Tokyo, is with each of my international clients, I have an associate who is my eyes and ears, who are with them 24/7, working full time. And I do online counseling, and I meet them like 2 times or 3 times a year during important competitions. And, we have that arrangement. Now, typically, the day perhaps starts, say, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., correct? Okay. Because my
time zones,
16 to 20 hours is how much I give to this profession each day. And then, So either the day starts early or the day ends early, you see. So it's online sessions. If I'm working with someone who's not in the country where I'm residing at that point in time or available, then I'll have a lot of data coming in from the sports science, sports medicine staff, or then my associates, or I have my own data based on the biofeedback technology I use for each of my clients. So I'm putting it together. Then I'm thinking about, how the progress has been, what has been discussed, what to do next. I'll be working on that. Then there's coaches. I work separately with them. I work with them with the athletes, because life is not easy to be a high performance coach, because the sword is always hanging on your head, you see. And here you need to get someone to perform, correct? And not surprisingly, a good 70-80% of high performance coaches don't have intact families. Most have broken families because they're always on the road. It's a very stressful job. The situation is not pretty. Then that's happening. Then I could be engaging with a sports science team. Then I could be on the field observing. Then I could be observing videos. And I'm with my athletes. I follow their system of what time they wake up, all the activities they do. In between the break time, and perhaps with the athlete from some other time zone. Then I teach as well, because that gives my sanity. Teaching is very relaxing for me. So when I'm back in Singapore, I have a few hours of teaching I do. And that also forces me to keep in touch with the latest research. Then until recently, I was working on a mental resilience app. So I'll be discussing that with either my co-founders or my psychology team, and thinking of how to make it better. And I've taken on this role of director for sports education in Mumbai.
Yeah.
With Big Bang Media. So there's a AICS program. It's a sports management technology program, because what's next for athletes when the curtain goes down is also very important for me. That's my biggest worry. Especially with Khelo India, where lakhs and lakhs of athletes are kind of like, getting recruited. Seldom are we thinking about what happens for the 99% who don't make it to the top. And even the 1% who make it to the top will not become millionaires, you see. And the more you're into sport, the more your skill set about life is reduces. Even basic communication is a struggle for you. So how do we kind of their second life or their second innings, when the curtains go down, what about their future? And especially today, for them to understand themselves, when you have, like, Anand was mentioning, there's so many people wanting to help, but they're also elite athletes have become commodities. So how do you kind of educate them on saving themselves, doing right by themselves? You see? So that's where, the opportunity I've got from Big Bang Media kind of allows me to do that. And then I'm working on some other programs with them. Then I'm with Reliance as a mentor, because what I realized is for India, I want to, whatever has worked for me, I want to share that, you see? And I want to see how I can raise the game of sports psychology. Because if someone from a tiny town like Mysore was never serious about her education, I was never ambitious in life. My plan for life was have 6 children, and my father would give a lot of money, and have a husband who takes me across the world. Really, I never ever wanted to work in my life. And I was always a below average student, because I studied only to make notes for my classmates. Utna hi tha. So I think if I can do this, then there's so much more that can happen. We Indians can achieve so much more. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So with that thinking, I felt, okay, if I were to work with athletes, there's only so much I can work with. But if I start kind of mentoring, supervising existing sports psychologists, then I can reach to many more. Because throughout my journey, for every 2 Olympic cycles, I've had 2 supervisors from different continents who has to pay from my own pocket. I wanted someone to check my work and tell me what's working, what's not. There has to be someone who does a bit of gatekeeping and kind of guidance. Otherwise, it's very easy to kind of stick to what's working and kind of, stick to that thinking. Because every Olympic cycle, generations are changing, mindsets are changing. So we also need to evolve, you see. So for those reasons, I'm working with Reliance, and, then Colonel Naren's here. So I bother him literally every day. We have some conversations. He's doing an amazing job with Army Marksman Unit. So I give a little time. Yeah. So typically, this is how my kind of day is. What
So
is your
basically
day?
not your day.
Yeah, and I cook as well when I'm at home. Whenever I can, I feed my family. And with India, I have an amazing mentor in Mr. Ravneet Gill. So I have conversations with him. I learn a lot about how to go about things in India. And then Anand and I speak. Actually, not so much. He's very far away from Mumbai. But yeah, so typically this is how it is. Typically, but never a dull day.
That's most important.
I love what I do.
For people who have entered this profession, Sanjana, one thing that you mentioned is that they have not, because they are young, they are not being able to gather those own life experiences which will help them take on the kind of athletes that actually may be approaching them. Is there on their part a certain mismatch of expectations when they get into the field? Is it okay, how soon can I be attending the next Olympics kind of an expectation that they carry when they
Yeah.
step in?
Yeah, because one, of course, the intention is always good. And you can't wait in today's life to gather that experience because you have to cater to what's put in front of you. But I think they need to understand the nuances of the sport, understand the athlete, and that is where your observation of training, competitions, all of that comes in handy. Correct? Yeah, the novelty of sports psychology. Because for some reason, when people say you're very accomplished, I kind of I'm not comfortable with that,
Okay.
with that phrase, because for me, in my line of work, irrespective of whether it's a grassroots athlete or whether it's the greatest of all, they're equal. It's about serving them. But then it's also about the expertise. It just turns out that because I've mostly worked with the ones who are gunning for the podium, that's become my expertise because that's where I put my thought and energy into. So again, thanks to social media and it's become some kind of a rat race, I think. That's what I'm observing in India. It's more about who you're working with because ethics are not in place. So they talk about who they're working with. So there's a lot of comparison, they're looking for social validation. Rather than looking for validation from their client, whether what they're doing is working, they're looking for validation outside. So the novelty of the profession has become much more attractive than the service of it. You know what I mean? So I think in any profession, or just sports psychology, when novelty overtakes the service you need to render, um, it is not a good situation. It is not a good situation.
Yeah, I think that's to be honest, true for the entire sports industry.
And then we can't even blame them, right? Because sorry,
The question is that or I
Yes,
think there is a
Sanjana.
video like that.
Yes.
today Zoom won't let Anand speak. Yeah, yeah.
I
What I
don't
was
think that's
saying is
possible.
we can't even blame them because this sports psychology wave is new. Uh, most people, organizations, clubs, coaches, athletes want that help, and they're going for whoever's availability for less expensive price tag, you see. So investment in mind coaching in terms of how much you pay, that also matters. So if you have 20,000-30,000 bucks to spare, then you can't be expecting someone who comes with a 5 or 7 years experience to do that.
Correct.
So, and then what I'm also seeing is there are quite a many entities who want to have the sports science team without much understanding of how they want to use it. And with the Khelo India funds, they need to show where the funds are being used. So we have this one, that one, that one. Correct. So, but still, I think no matter what it is good news that everyone's talking about it, everyone's interested. The sports psychologists are interested. It's okay. The intentions are good. Their direction might not or approach might not be the best, but that's okay for now. I want to believe things will grow and improve. And no matter for what reason people are wanting to hire, or for namesake or for real reasons, irrespective of how much they pay. So there has been a massive shift from last Olympics to this. I can very clearly see it. It's there.
Another aspect of that you touched upon, we to have an understanding of the nuances of a sport. Does that kind of limit you to the sports that kind of sports person that you work with, because one can only develop an understanding of so many sports during their lifetime to be able to actually help elite sports person. Is this premise correct?
Yeah. So you know why that's important first. So there are fundamental aspects of the mind, the self-concept. self-esteem, self-worth, self-efficacy, self-confidence. Then there's motivation, internal, external, high, low, you know, which of your needs drive your motivation? Is your need for excellence in mastering a skill? Is that your need? Is that your motivation? Is your motivation competing and winning? Because there has to be a balance of that too. Then an individual's personality, understanding themselves, or the focus, concentration, attention, that realm of things, or anxiety, arousal, emotional regulation. Now, these are the fundamentals. These are things that have to be had conversations about at the grassroots. With most Indian athletes, these conversations are happening at the elite level.
Okay.
एक तो वो है. But then those conversations need to be had. Unless the fundamentals are right, there's no point going into a very sport-specific nuances. Now, when we talk about performance, when we talk about bringing your best, when we talk about peak potential, when we talk about taking an athlete into the zone of optimal functioning for them to be able to perform at their best, when we talk about performance consistency, correct? When we talk about unleashing their best potential, then it has to become sports nuanced.
Yes.
Correct? For example, let's say a spin bowler tells you, okay, you know what? I get into the approach. I know exactly where I want the ball to be placed. I do all that I do during training, but during match, the ball does not go where I want it to land. My feeling is correct. My approach is correct. Whatever I'm feeling, I'm just so convinced that it's supposed to land there, but it's not. Now, how do you understand this? It's not just about getting distracted. Someone could be hyper focused, and that could be a problem. Because as much as focus is good, too much of focus is also not good. So first we want to understand, is it a fear of failure or are you chasing success? If you're avoiding failure, then आप सावधान हो जाते हो. You become careful. तो आपका rhythm गया. ठीक है ना? Now the moment you become सावधान, the brain registers it. It's a lot of biochemistry and neuropsychology here. The brain registered that there's an alarming situation. कुछ तो ठीक नहीं है. ठीक है ना? So as a protective mechanism, the brain will send nerve innervations to different parts of your body. This is where your heart rate rises. The way your skin conducts gets different. The oculation of your eye changes. You literally go through physical blurring. Your muscles become tight. So if you're a bowler, the fine muscles of your palm, fingers are so important. The smoothness of your swing is so important. So sab jagah, and you know, your skin cheats. Your skin conductance is different. So what you think is the right hold, the feel, actually isn't how it is during a training. उस अंदाजे पे आप बोल कर रहे हो. And then you're wondering, सब सही जा रहा है? Why isn't the ball going where I want it to go? Why isn't it landing where I want it to land? पूरा हिसाब लगा के ही आप एक decision लेते हो ना? You commit.
Correct.
Now, when you're being very careful, you could be sitting on the fence in terms of commitment के ये डालूं या वो डालूं. So, for example, if I were to discuss के attention issue, focus issue कहाँ से आ रहा है, then we'll discuss in terms of broad, narrow, internal, external, and the attentional styles. क्या भी देखो, when they're assessing the situation, आपको broad और external होना चाहिए because you're gauging the situation. फिर बाद में आपको analyze करना है तो you want to be broad, but you want to be attending to your thoughts relevant to the bowling action or what you want to do with the ball situation, reading the match situation, जो भी है, ठीक? And then you need to commit to that decision. Because quickly, whether you do it consciously or not, immediately your brain visualizes, your mind visualizes how you want to bowl.
Correct.
वो automatic होता है. As a human being, we visualize every single time. ठीक है ना? अगर आपने commit ही नहीं किया, तो visualization ठीक से नहीं जाएगा. And when the brain automatically has to go into visualization, कहीं ना कहीं there's some thought in your head. तो वहाँ confusion हो रहा है. And when you execute it, you should not be thinking because now you're committed. You're making that, happen. So to understand these little details, you need to understand the nuances. So when an athlete tells you something, because this is very performance specific, and this is about consistency of performance.
And if I can add just a small point here, and I'll let you continue that the athlete, more than English or Hindi, he speaks the language of the sport.
Yeah.
Right. So
you need to understand the terminology. So true.
And respond to him in the same language. Otherwise, he will never be able to relate to you. So yeah, please continue.
So it's not like you're born with all the knowledge of all sports.
Exactly.
So when you
Yes.
start working, you need to, this is where you understand, you observe, you read up, you watch the matches, but you don't want to know too much about the sport because unintentionally you don't want to become an associate or
Coach.
assistant coach.
Coach. Yeah.
You want to know just enough to understand the nuances, the mind game, you know. So, and the longer you stay in a sport, you get to know it better. And your question was, do you become super specialized? It will
Yeah.
happen,
Yeah.
but over a period of time, like for example, I'm doing 13 different sports for Paris.
Okay.
ठीक? But then these are also sports that I've engaged in over at least 2 Olympic cycles, or three, some five, because it's my sixth.
Hmm.
So some sports for 6 Olympic cycles. So you're a lot better at one. Perhaps you're picking up on the other. And in a few, you want to be careful because you know a little too much.
Okay. Okay.
ठीक है ना? So there's no fixed formula for that. You just have to kind of go with the flow and gauge it.
Another thing that you spoke about, Sanjana, was that if something can go wrong, it could go horribly wrong. If you're okay, any low light from the last 20 years that you would like to share as something for future sports psychologists? Yeah, this is, you may have a day like this as well. So you need to take it
Yeah.
in a strength.
So it's like you'll never have, what to say, the answers for all situations, you know. And imagine if I'm working with an athlete for 3 or 4 Olympic cycles. Does that mean that ideally, after you have worked with one Olympic cycle or 1 or 2 years, their problem should have been resolved, right? You know what I mean? So
I
we are not
understand.
looking for a resolution.
Mhm.
As sports psychologists, we don't solve problems. We help them understand their problems and issues better. We help them open their mind. We help them find the root cause of the problem behavior or the behavior that is coming in the way of their performance. ठीक है ना? And we give them mind skills that can help them manage it. ठीक? वो एक है. And there are times when I've had to tell my athletes, you know what, this area I can't help you because this is not my expertise. For example, they're human beings, so they come, well, perhaps they have relationship issues. I might hear and understand them, but that's not my place to help them resolve it. So then I have to refer them to a relationship kind of a psychologist, you know, or they have something that's very psychiatric in nature. Perhaps they have clinical depression. Because I come from a clinical psychology background, I can pick up, you know, that this is not situation specific anxiety. This is actually generalized anxiety disorder. But still, I have to refer them to a psychiatrist and a clinical psychologist because I'm not expert for that. It's going to be there. There are going to be times when the athletes will find fault with you. Yeah. And we don't take it personally because the fact they're trying to find fault with you says that, you know, they're unhappy about something. And for us to assume कि हम जो कहेंगे वो perfect रहेगा, it's wrong because we're not looking for perfection here. ठीक है ना? So yeah, plenty of time all the time. So it's very normal. And it's okay to tell the athlete that, you know, I can't help you at all. It's okay because just because they're a client does not mean they're in it or they're going to be cooperative. You see, in my line of work, because they sought me, they're already sold to the idea, they're open-minded and eager. But if it's a situation where where it's prescribed, someone's hired you and you're prescribed, you now need to psychoeducate these athletes and to get them working. That's a different ballgame altogether, you know. So this is where you don't want to convince them. You don't want to get into convincing. You psychoeducate them what you can do and also tell them what you can't do, what works, what does not work, and leave it to them. But organizations won't be happy if their athletes are not working with you.
Correct.
So that's the danger in India too, where athletes actually feel kind of harassed, heckled, that they must do this, they must do that, because there's this person, they must go and talk to them.
Something that you mentioned, Sanjana, was that you use teaching as a way to stay abreast of the developments in your field.
Yeah.
In addition to that, are there any other resources or references, books, journals, anything that helps you keep updated? And you also touched upon technology being you use technology in some way to help your clients. Could you
Yeah.
touch upon these two things, like how one
How to keep yourself updated on the latest.
in
So
two aspects. One is one is as you said, the athlete is getting more and more younger. Possibly the age gap is widening. One.
Yeah.
Second is that yes, things are changing so much more in terms of new tools, technologies, and new research being put out there. So
Yeah.
on both of these fronts.
So ChatGPT, Bard. Well, no, there's nothing wrong with not everything is wrong in a GPT or Bard, but it's only gonna, I would this word spew or generate whatever's there. Google Scholar is a good place to find research. But most of the research that comes under Google Scholar, you don't have like the full text. You have an abstract.
Yes.
Now, the benefit of being associated with a university is that you have access to their online databases. You see, because they have the online library resources. So you have EBSCOhost. EBSCOhost is a huge online database where you have PubMed, you have PsycInfo, you have Science Direct. So anything to do specifically with sports-related topics such as sports psychology under EBSCOhost is the best online database. You just fill in the keywords, you get the latest research, and depending on how much, what kind of subscription the university has, you get that many full manuscripts available to you. You can read them, make your notes. Then attending conferences, you know, and having kind of like, conversations. That organization I talked about, INSPA. So they have these coffee kind of conversations, a lot happening, and these little webinars. So they have a lot of discussions, growing your network of sports psychologists, having those conversations with them, learning from each other, and just sharing with them what your struggles are with your work. It's okay. Because I see in India, they're not very open about talking about the challenges they go through when they work or when they're stuck. You learn a lot through conversations, with your uh, peers. So that's there. Yeah. And then in terms of, what was the second question again?
So
In terms
second
of
one was
technology.
regarding, yes.
So a good 60% of my work is technology based. So for example, right from HRV to EEG to ECG to, lactic acid, concentrates to, their blood profile in terms of their magnesium, their zinc, their vitamin profile completely, their glucose levels, their changes in hemoglobin profile, all of that, their gut health, then their skin conductance, then the eye oculation. There's a lot of eye tracking you can do. And then, yeah, all of that put together,
Okay.
And then there's this coherence bit between your feelings and your thought process. Then you have the entire nervous system involved in it. Then the gait, the kinesiology of their behavior. If the gait is shifting, if the gait shifts, you can tell a lot about the nature of stress they're experiencing and understanding them whether they're a very cognitive or somatic anxiety kind of person and giving them interventions based on that. So there's a whole lot of it. And there's quite a many gadgets, like, just these rings, for example, or ultra human or Aura ring. It can give you so much of information that is so useful. It can prevent injuries, and sleep is very important as a recovery tool. But then an Aura ring can actually tell you your readiness throughout the day and what activities kind of get you tired, and you can then work on interventions on how to make them feel fresh. What is something they can do for 5 minutes, 10 minutes for that example, and understand the nature of their sleep, in terms of the graph it produces, and just a whole lot of things. There's just a bunch of them.
So yeah, technology is, I guess, like,
Yeah, it makes your work
completely
easier. Yeah, because technology as a complement to your interventions, technology to help you analyze needs, technology to help you monitor, technology that is assistive. Now, if you can't sleep, you can't sleep. You might do meditation, you might do massages. If all of that is not working, before you take sleeping pills, I would recommend them to wear a gadget that can, help them sleep rather than consume something orally. And because most of these elite athletes are traveling, for them to move from one zone to the other.
Yes.
So there are gadgets that can help them do that too. Quickly move into the next zone, So it kind of reduces jet lag. And then we work on pre-competition routines that can start 10 days ahead of time. You know,
Okay.
so there's just so many things, interesting things.
Yeah. So for those who are planning to get into this space, what advice would you have? What are, let's say, if you have these as your motivations to become a sports psychologist, you are on the right track. If these are your expectations, then probably this is not the field for you. Is there something that you'd like to share that could help?
Yeah, because there's a misconception that, because you give friendly advice to your friends, then you can be a sports psychologist. As sports psychologists, we don't give advice. There's no advice giving. As sports psychologists, we don't predict. We don't promise any performance outcome. As sports psychologists, we are not giving any solution. As sports psychologists, we're helping them open their mind. We are giving them suggestions. We're explaining to them how it works. You know what I mean? Sports psychology is about facilitating best performance, not promising a medal. If the best performance is a medal, so be it. ठीक है ना? So because you can talk does not mean that you could enjoy your role as a sports psychologist. I wouldn't say you should do it or not. It's really left to them. But then being a sports psychologist is work. It is not as cool as it looks, you know? Yeah. Then second of all, there's this thinking that because we spend a lot of time around sports and you've been a coach or you've been a journalist or something, you can become a sports psychologist. Maybe you have a good understanding of a human being, but to understand the processes of psychology, you need education. And that's where your basic degree becomes very important, to understand those processes on how the human mind works. What is the connection between mind and body? Motivation is just seen as a motivation, but motivation depends on intention, your needs, your achievement orientation, your hierarchy of needs. There's so much to motivation. I could do 100 workshops on motivation alone. And this did not come because I'm intelligent. ऐसा नहीं है. बहुत सारा पढ़ा था, बहुत सारा सीखा है, working with the athletes. And अब जाके समझ में आए कि कितना ज्यादा है. ठीक है ना? So, and sports psychology is not just about talking. There's a meaningful talk. There's a goal to that conversation. है ना? तो वो है. And sports psychology is not just about travel. Because I travel a lot. Most young people think कि बढ़िया आप मोनाको गए तो वो तो बढ़िया होगा. ताइवान गए थे वो तो बढ़िया होगा. जापान से वहाँ अच्छा होगा. Because as a sports psychologist, I can speak for myself. I'm the first to wake up. है ना? So if my athletes and coaches are waking up at 4 because they have to ask to travel, I have to be up by 2:30, get done with my business because they might want to talk to me and have sessions before they set out.
Yes.
And I'm the last to go to bed. And then I observe their warm-up, I observe their competition. Competition के बाद में भी किसी को बात करना है. A coach will get a break. Competition नहीं है तो athlete के साथ नहीं है तो. An athlete will certainly get a break. Competition के बाद या तो किसी से मरम्मत करवा रहे हैं या तो chill मार रहे हैं. I'm happy for them. But as a sports psychologist ऐसा नहीं होता है. As a nutritionist, आपका start and end to the day है. As a physio, start and end है. As a psychologist, especially with high performance, it's very मतलब you can't say no when someone's asking you for help.
Yes.
ठीक है ना? तो and it is work. अगर performance enhancement नहीं हो रहा है, if you're talking about being a psychologist, performance enhancements नहीं दिख रहे हैं, तो वो आपकी मदद नहीं लेंगे. ये हाय हेलो आप कैसे हो, खाना खाए क्या, सोया क्या, all that goody things तब तक ही चलता है. But when it comes to competitions, athletes are looking for that support. ठीक है ना? If you're ready for that, and as a sports psychologist, you need to be stable yourself, the most motivated. आपको कोई आके नहीं पूछेगा कि how are you? Because you are the one who's supposed to be feeling right all the time. Have head up on your shoulder. You can't be complaining. You can't share about your personal life. बच्चे कितने हैं, पति क्या करते हैं, बच्चे कहाँ हैं, आपको क्या पसंद है, आप खाने में क्या पसंद करते हैं, आप शॉपिंग कहाँ करते हो, आपका इंस्टा हैंडल क्या है. इंडिया में तो सीन अलग ही है. I mean, I hope things will change. But so if this is what you're looking for, then perhaps this is not the best profession for you. ऐसा नहीं कि you're not capable, but you also need to. And travel का मतलब है कि वीजा के चक्कर काटो, एयरपोर्ट के चक्कर काटो, वेट करो, वेट फॉर मिस्ड फ्लाइट्स, डिलेड फ्लाइट्स, कैंसल्ड फ्लाइट्स, ट्रांजिट में क्या स्टोरी होगा पता नहीं, ठीक है ना? एंड यू आर इंजेक्टिंग अ लॉट ऑफ अनहेल्थी एयर on your flights, and you have to adjust to food जहाँ पे आप जाते हो, because you can't be complaining. You see, you're supposed to be the most thir. But it's important to take care of your well-being also. But ज़्यादा टाइम नहीं मिलता है well-being के लिए, ठीक है ना? या एक चीज याद आई ऋत्विक, आप जो एथिक्स कह रहे थे ना, बिकॉज वी ट्रैवल विद एथलीट्स, ठीक, बाउंड्रीज क्रॉस होना बहुत इजी हो जाता है. So I can't have just a meal with my athlete just because they're sitting alone and eating, or a coach, unless I have pre-planned a conversation with them, because I can't socialize. एक दूसरा, क्योंकि I'm an औरत, my athlete is a female athlete, चलो सेशन अपने रूम में कर लेते हैं, ऐसा नहीं होता है. हम उनकी बेडरूम एंटर नहीं कर सकते, वो हमारी बेडरूम एंटर नहीं कर सकते. अगर होटल रूम में करना है तो इट हैज टू बी एन अरेंजमेंट वेयर योर बेड इज नॉट सीन, एक एक्स्ट्रा रूम जैसा कुछ है, ये जैसे स्वीट रूम में होता है, या coming back to your question, आप पूछो, it's that. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि because you're a sports psychologist you won't be emotional and all of that or not that. By the way, if your client doesn't do well, you can't show it on your face. If they do exceedingly well, you can't look thrilled, because then the clients, you'll become one of the other people.
Yeah.
You have to keep a check on your emotions, if you're ready for all of this, and then you need to be able to collaborate. As much as it seems like a solo thing, most of the time you're collaborating with sports science, sports medicine team, and coaches, जो elite coaches होते हैं, they will only respect hard work, commitment, dedication.
Yeah.
है ना? So if your athletes and coaches are doing that, you can't be मैं थक गई, मुझे आराम करना है. You can do if you choose to, but वो respect आपको नहीं मिलेगा, क्योंकि जब वो मर पिट रहे हैं, for the honor of their country, then you can't be complaining, है ना? So having said that, of course you have to take care of your well-being, because if you are well, you can take care of others. ठीक है ना?
Absolutely.
But ये है.
So on this point, actually, sorry, a very interesting, not anecdote, it's a kind of conversation.
Anil, just like for everybody, we have another 8 minutes. So I kind of open the floor and I hand it over to Anand. Anand, please,
I will only take 15-20 seconds. So when I was, and because see, we are talking about entering an industry for the wrong notions or for the wrong motives. So when I was trying to enter almost 5.5 years back, and I had this conversation with Apachu, and I call him Appa, so I asked this, that, and he's like, "Beta, MBA कर लिया है, तो 70% टाइम तो माइक्रोसॉफ्ट suite of products पे ही काम करना है. Rest 15, 20, 30% can be others, right? And that too, if that 15, 20% motivates you enough, then only enter the industry. And I think that one advice has been so great for myself, because I haven't taken a single selfie. I have met like more or less some decent, very known, let's say, aces, especially from cricket and all. The only selfie which I took was with Kiran Bhai and RP Singh. And that too because Kiran Bhai is now, I can say that he's like not just another colleague, he's more of a colleague, you can say, obviously for a very specific duration when auctions happen. That's true. I was like, this is my last one probably. And I should have something that 5 years, 10 years down the line, if I tell people, then it shouldn't be that people are like, लगता नहीं है तुमने काम किया. So yeah, let's open the floor for everyone. And Rutik, you asked one question, so we request if Mr. Gopal.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
Doctor,
that's our 40-minute session, actually.
Yeah, but it was very insightful. Doctor, you said that you only cater to English-speaking audience, but then, for example, if we said 10 countries, right? Somebody from Japan speaking English, or somebody from Africa, or even somebody from India who has studied in the regional language, वो regional language में सोचेगा, फिर translate करेगा, फिर बोलेगा. तो सब इंग्लिश बोल रहे हैं, अपन कोई चीज कौन कैसे इंटरप्रेट करेगा? व्हाट इज योर अप्रोच? बोल तो सब इंग्लिश ही रहे, पर काफी सारी चीजें अलग अलग कल्चर्स में अलग है.
हाँ, तो उनका कल्चर समझना पड़ता है ना बेटा. जैसे मैंने इंडिया में कहा कि इंडिया में आप एक एक स्टेट को ले लो, कितना अलग है, ठीक है ना? एंड उसी के अंदर जिस कस्बे से वो आते हैं, या विलेज से आते हैं, या तालुक से आते हैं, उसके भी होते हैं. So the same way हर एक country का एक broad culture होता है, and then there are nuances of that individual, and also sports के भी बहुत होते हैं cultures depending on the sport, and within the sport depending on your coach and the coaching practices, and आप किस private club से आते हो या उस setup से, तो is it easy? It is not. इसलिए जब मेरा थ्रू वर्ड ऑफ माउथ ये आते हैं ना, जनरली वहीं पे थोड़ा बहुत फिल्टर हो जाते हैं, बिकॉज दैट पर्सन वुड हैव सेड कि preferences in a client क्या है in terms of language, because language is very important. But the good thing about sports also, and the nature of our work is also, we observe a lot competition sports, है ना? तो sports वालों की भाषा ना, अगर वो perfect भी नहीं है तो बहुत सारी चीजें समझ में आ जाती, ठीक? But because we also talk about emotions, I prefer those who might not be perfect in the English, because मेरी English भी बहुत सही होनी है, but at least एक conversation ढंग का हो जाए, तो ऐसा है.
One more question, and then probably I think Naren is in line. So you also mentioned mind skills, right? When should an athlete actually look for help or assistance from a psychologist? I mean, elite athletes, of course, they would know, or probably somebody in their circle would know, but then इंडिया में इतना पॉपुलेशन है, इतने सारे एथलीट्स, when would they know कि अब जरूरत है या अब असिस्टेंस लेना चाहिए?
तो मोर देन ऑफ्टन ना, बहुत जब देर हो गई होती है तब समझ में आता है कोच को या एथलीट को कि हाँ मदद ले लेनी चाहिए, बिकॉज ऑल्सो द मेंटालिटी इन द इंडियन स्पोर्ट सिस्टम है कि यू ट्राई. गलत बात नहीं है, आप कोशिश करो, बट कोशिश जब आपको प्रॉब्लम ही समझ में नहीं आ रहा है तो आप कोशिश किस चीज की कर रहे हैं. मोस्ट एथलीट्स डू नॉट अंडरस्टैंड कि उनका प्रॉब्लम कहाँ पे है. हर एक चीज को इंडिया में मोटिवेशन का प्रॉब्लम कहते हैं या फोकस का प्रॉब्लम कहते हैं, समझे ना? तो आई वुड से कि ये कॉन्वर्सेशन ग्रास रूट से स्टार्ट होना चाहिए. ऐसे नहीं कि बच्चों को बोलना है कि आप गलत हो, नहीं, उनको समझाना है कि आपको ऐसे ऐसा महसूस हो रहा है ना. टेक देम इनटू वर्कशॉप्स, कि उनसे पूछो कि आपको क्या मजा आता है, कैसे एक्सपीरियंस हुआ, जब आप हार जाते हो तो कैसे फील होता है, कंपटीशन के पहले कैसे फील होता है, ठीक है ना? एंड आई थिंक हैव कॉन्वर्सेशंस विद द पेरेंट्स आल्सो, बिकॉज मोस्ट ऑफ द स्पेशली इफ आई कैन स्पीक फॉर इंडिया, ऐसा नहीं कि दूसरे कंट्रीज में नहीं होता, बट मोस्टली एशियन कंट्रीज में ज्यादा होता है, एंड इंडिया में तो पेरेंट्स का इन्वॉल्वमेंट बहुत ज्यादा है, बिकॉज दे सी दिस एज एन इन्वेस्टमेंट. अब उनको रिटर्न ऑफ इन्वेस्टमेंट चाहिए मेडल से, ठीक है ना कहीं उनको अपना सेल्फ वर्थ और सेल्फ एस्टीम अपने बच्चों की जो आउटकम्स हैं उनके एंडेवर से उससे जोड़ देते हैं. बच्चे तो जनरली खुश ही रहते हैं whether they win or lose. थोड़ा बुरा लगेगा, बाद में जो दोस्त ने जीता है उसके गले में जाके हाथ डाल के वो गप्पे मारेंगे, बट यहाँ पेरेंट्स का जो बुरा हाल होता है, वो बच्चे को बुलाएंगे, उसको डांटेंगे, उसको गिल्ट महसूस कराएंगे, बिकॉज गिल्ट ट्रिपिंग इज वन ऑफ द वेपन्स आवर पेरेंट्स हैव यूज्ड एंड स्टिल चूज टू यूज, है ना? तो आई थिंक द पेरेंट्स आल्सो अंडरस्टैंड कि अगर ऐसा होता है तो, एंड क्या होता है ना, समझो एक बच्चा ने कंपटीशन खेल के हार के आया फॉर एग्जांपल, द चैटर अराउंड दैट चाइल्ड कि ये हो गया क्या, वो हो गया क्या, वो हो गया क्या, सो वी आर एक्चुअली पुटिंग थॉट्स इनटू देयर माइंड, एंड पूरा वहां नैरेटिव ही खराब हो रहा है. मतलब उनका अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ व्हाट द एक्सपीरियंस, वहीं से वो बड़ी गलती स्टार्ट हो रही है. When they start attributing कि हाँ मुझे ऐसे से महसूस हुआ तो हाँ ये मोटिवेशन प्रॉब्लम है, ऐसे ऐसे हुआ तो मैं डिस्ट्रैक्ट हो गया, ऐसे ऐसे किया तो आई हैव नॉट वर्कड हार्ड. तो आई होप दैट आंसर्स योर क्वेश्चन, ऋत्विक.
Naren,
Naren?
yeah.
Yeah, good
कलन
evening.
साहब नमस्ते, कैसे हैं आप?
कैसे हैं आप?
बढ़िया सर.
So my question is, what is exactly a success and a failure in a high performance? So why I'm asking you this question is, now in recent last couple of weeks while I was looking for certain coaches for India, foreign coaches, so I ended up seeing profiles of international athletes, European athletes, who are 6-time Olympians but never got an Olympic medal. 3 times finalists, 4-time finalists, never reached the podium. Then there are people 1-time medalist but couldn't sustain more than 3 Olympic cycles. And then there are people from very remote countries, which are not the traditional playing countries, but in the top 6 ranking in that particular Olympics. So, how do you define high performance? Is it only the podium finish, gold medal, or if how do you define it when you go and when as psychologists, if you talk about INSPA, and let's say 6 INSPA psychologists are with 6 athletes on the top 6. So will the 6th psychologist not perform and the first psychologist perform? So how it works?
Sir, it depends on who's asking the question. So if a person who's giving the funding asking the question, what is success? I won't speak as a sports psychologist because for us, there's no success or failure. Success is when you step out of that playing field, if you feel you couldn't have done better, that is success. More than often, I can speak for my clients, they have won goals even at a world championship, but they've not been happy because they know और रह गया, अपना best नहीं दिया, ठीक है ना? So as a sports psychologist, that will be the answer. But if I'm someone who's funding, if I'm the government who's giving you money, to me success will be measured by the number of medals because I'm funding the medals, ठीक है ना? Now, if it's an organization and the organization has plenty of athletes, or if it's a state system,
Let's make it more specific. Let's take a case: a three-time Olympian gold medalist versus a six-time Olympian, who is, in the athlete's point of view.
no, it depends on the athlete in question. Like for most Indian athletes, qualifying for Olympics is a big thing. That was also a problem that limited us from being our best, all these Olympic cycles. Qualify हो गए तो मतलब it's never about के podium में जाना ही है, तो qualification तो होना ही है, ठीक है ना? So it really is the individual in question. If you want to make the national colors at that many Olympics and that makes you feel कि हाँ मैंने 4 किए हैं 5 किए हैं, it's okay. If that is how you define a success, that is success for you. But if success for you is like podium finish lena hi hai, then that is successful. If your definition of success is no, I have to get the gold. PV Sindhu, she's looking for a gold. Perhaps the day she gets gold is what she feels is success. So it really depends on who is measuring it and how they define. Now, in a bigger scheme of things, if you're talking about expertise, who has a better expertise to be a better coach? I would say someone who's had exposure to many such events, someone who has fought hard at many such events, someone who has fallen and gone back again and again and again. Because the qualities that grow within you when you fail and you don't give up. And that's the beauty of success, sports, right? Sports allows you to fall and then rise up again, stand up and walk, stand up and run. So if you're looking in terms of what coach is better, I would say someone who might not have a medal, but who has been to for more number of exposures to Olympic Games or championship, because they've been there, they've done that. है ना? Because at the elite level, coaches can't be the sole people giving them the technical expertise. More than often, the athletes have a much better technical expertise than the coach. But who you need is who understands the, the magnanimity of the situations, the, complications, the complexities of being at the major games, competing at that level. Someone who understands that is what you need. Because you need a partner in a coach and not just a teacher. But at grassroots and intermediate, you need more of a teacher and a guru than a partner.
Yeah.
Again, it depends on council level. Sir ne smile kiya. Pass. No, but it's not about pass or fail. On the lighter side, I was saying. But मेरे तजुर्बे में मैंने यही देखा और यही सीखा.
Yes, thank you so much, Sanjana, for taking out the time and spending.
It was very impromptu, by the way.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. It was superb, to be honest.
Yeah, thank you so much. अपना ख्याल रखो सब. Bye bye.